November 2004, American Roy Hallums is kidnapped in Baghdad. His abductors demand a huge ransom, but the US government does not pay ransoms. Instead, it turns to an extraordinary organization to try to rescue him. The kidnappers threaten to sell Roy to Al-Qaeda. Can Roy Hallums be rescued before he is murdered? By 2004, kidnapping in war-torn Iraq is big business, worth millions of dollars in ransoms. Extremist Al-Qaeda leader Abu Musab al-Zakari is spreading terror by shooting or beheading kidnapped foreigners. But for American civilian Roy Hallums, a job in Baghdad supplying food to the Iraqi army is an opportunity to earn good money and help his family. An opportunity that becomes a curse. This is the story of how Roy endures months of brutality in the face of death. How his family disobeyed the FBI to try and help him. And how an extraordinary team called the Hostage Working Group harnesses elite military forces to save Roy's life. It's 5:30 p.m., the end of the working day. But Roy Hallums is staying late. He has no idea that his life is about to become a living nightmare. Outside, they've already shot a security guard. This is a well-planned operation, but one employee avoids them and now tries to save Roy. The greatest opportunity to escape is during the first moments of the abduction. But Roy is paralyzed with fear.
I was terrified. Are they just gonna kill me right now and leave me on the side of the street, or are they gonna take me to some place so they can video me being killed?
The terror that kidnapped victims experience is well known to psychologists.
Kidnappers are actively trying to induce compliance through that shock of capture. The point is that what they want is a docile victim, and by loud, violent action, you can induce it that way.
News of the abduction immediately reaches the Hostage Working Group, a unique high-security branch of the US government. It was set up in 2004 at the US Embassy in Baghdad to tackle the sudden explosion of kidnappings in Iraq. The identities of all current members of this team must remain secret.
Our mission in Hostage Working Group was to recover the hostages, bring those responsible to justice, through that prevent future kidnappings, and obviously raise public awareness of the danger of kidnapping in Iraq.
This team must now act fast to coordinate action and intelligence between all the services who will search for the kidnapped victims. Diplomats will contact other embassies and religious leaders. Intelligence agents will collect information. The FBI will work with the Iraqi police and victims' families. And elite military forces will conduct search and rescue operations.
The initial concern is getting as much information as quickly as possible and then getting it out to the community.
In hostage situations, speed is vital. No one knows this better than former team member Dan O'Shea.
Depending upon who grabbed the victim, you may have had as many as 3 or 4 days between a kidnapping, an internet video that makes a demand, and then an ultimatum with 48 hours that if you don't meet our demands, we're going to kill him.
The FBI and the Iraqi police immediately interview eyewitnesses. Their findings are fed back to the Hostage Working Group. Another employee of Roy's company, Filipino Robert Tarangoy, has also been kidnapped. They don't yet know that this man will later play a crucial role in Roy's story. The team create an intelligence file on each victim, known as a target pack. It includes the victim's background, witness interviews, and all other useful information. Now stripped of his former clothes, Roy is locked in a kidnapper's safe house, one of many he'll pass through.
You have no idea what's going to happen, or how long you might live.
One of the major fear-inducing elements of a kidnap is the utter lack of control that you have. It's one of the reasons they put a hood on you. The kidnappers will also put a hood on somebody so that you can't look the victim in the eye. Why? Because if you look them in the eye, it becomes harder to hurt them, kill them, treat them as merchandise.
The next day, 7,000 miles away in Southern California, a phone call to Roy Hallums' ex-wife changes her life.
It was Carrie, my daughter, and she was hysterical. She was screaming, "Mom, Dad's been kidnapped." I said, "No, someone's made a terrible mistake."
That evening, the FBI visits Susan and confirm the terrible news. But they ask her not to speak about it publicly. In Baghdad, the moment Roy's employers have been waiting for. The kidnappers demand a $12 million ransom for Roy and $10 million for the Filipino Robert Tarangoy. More than 400 foreigners and over 30,000 Iraqis have been kidnapped so far in Iraq. To stay ahead of the search, they move Roy from one safe house to the next. And still, Roy has not been told why they've taken him. Most worrying of all, he has been taken at the height of al-Zakari's broadcast executions of foreign kidnapped victims. Will he suffer the same fate? Roy Hallums has been kidnapped in Baghdad. His kidnappers demand $12 million for him, but the US does not pay ransoms. At this time, extremist leader al-Zakari is executing foreign hostages. What will happen to Roy? 2 weeks have passed and there's been no further news. The hostage working group knows that every day puts Roy in greater danger. The team continue to drive a massive search for him, both locally and internationally. On the street, local agents pull in anyone with known links to kidnap groups. The team also employs intelligence agencies around the world to monitor and analyze suspect communications in Iraq.
And when something came up that said hostages on it, then it got fed into our group. And we looked at that and analyzed that and bore down on that.
Every bit of information that came in was evaluated to answer who has Roy Hallums. Is it a Shia group? Is it a Sunni group? Is it a hardcore insurgent group? Is it Zarqawi?
Day 20, and an important lead comes from a man who walks in off the street. He's overheard a suspicious conversation in a bar.
You had to weigh in the motivations for the person coming forward with the information. Sometimes they were motivated by monetary gain. Sometimes it was they thought they were going to be able to get a visa out of it. So it was never very simple.
But every possible lead is investigated. American and Iraqi intelligence agents are deployed to the bar. The man who was overheard mentioned a prisoner in a nearby village. Under firm questioning, it turns out he belongs to a known crime family. But by the time the patrols arrive at their address, it's too late. If that prisoner is Roy, there's no trace of him now. For security reasons, the FBI shares little information with Roy's family.
You just craved information, like, tell me something. And not getting any was just so terrible. Each day seemed like a year. Carrie came out and she laid on my sofa and sort of curled up in a fetal position for 3 days and couldn't move. And seeing her that way broke my heart.
I thought my dad was probably in a cage and being tortured. I knew that the authorities were doing their best, but when you have a loved one that's being held and you don't know what's happening to them, sometimes the best doesn't feel like enough.
When information about Roy or any other hostage rise up, we do not lose faith. No one in that group is going to quit. We know the absolute horror this inflicts on innocent families, and we're very committed.
3 weeks into their search, a phone call gives the team new hope. It mentions an American hostage. Analysis by the National Security Agency traces it to a rural area south of the city. The hostage working group notify ground forces who scour the area. But with eyes and ears everywhere, the kidnappers are always a step ahead. It's day 26. Roy has no idea where he is or who took him. But the initial shock of his abduction is subsiding.
When you're first captured, I mean, you're terrified because you don't know if you're going to live another 5 minutes or not. Are they going to take me to some place so they can video me being killed? But then after some weeks, you think, well, maybe they're going to keep me alive for something. So you go down to, well, you're just really scared.
Unable to sleep, Susan spends nights searching for any information about Roy. They were married for 30 years and are still very close.
I would think, what does he want me to do? I never wanted to make matters worse. So you're so torn. Do you try to help or do you just go on with your life? But you can't just go on with your life.
Kidnap is largely a psychological event, and it's not aimed at the hostage, it's aimed at the people outside. I mean, if you really want to hurt somebody, you don't hurt them, you hurt those they love. And that's exactly where kidnap gets its malignant power.
6 weeks into the kidnapping, Susan finds the first confirmation of Roy's ordeal on the internet. It compels her to act.
I hung the big blue ribbons on the tree because blue was Roy's favorite color, because then I felt like I was telling everybody that there was somebody in our family that had been taken hostage.
Susan now makes a big decision. She will plead publicly for Roy's release, even if it means disobeying the FBI. Roy served 20 years in the US Navy. The FBI are concerned that his military background would be revealed if Susan Hallums goes public.
If the captors didn't know that he had served in the military, it would have just meant death for him.
We think about the victims every day, and that's not an exaggeration. We go to work each day understanding that we have a cause that can save lives, and our efforts could actually have a very successful outcome.
Now in his 46th day of captivity, Roy Hallums arrives at his final destination, a farmhouse 18 miles south of Baghdad.
They had us walk into the building. But then they said, stop. And when I stopped, I saw there was a hole right there in front of my feet.
Roy's prison is a small concrete cellar already filled with several hostages. Here he will spend the rest of his imprisonment, bound and blindfolded, surviving on rice, water, and rotten fruit. Now, all chances of escape are gone. Only when he dares to defy his captor's orders not to remove his blindfold does Roy discover the other captives.
Robert Tarangoy was with me the entire time. They continued to say, if we hear anybody talking, we'll kill you. But at night, we would whisper back and forth to each other about, how you were doing and how you felt, or talk about something else.
Finally, Iraqi police report a new lead to the hostage working group.
Someone within a kidnapping ring saw one too many fellow Muslims being killed, and that's what prompted him to come forward.
The kidnapper points the finger at a rival gang. They're Sunni Muslims. He's heard they have an American hostage buried somewhere south of the city. This news commands a rapid response. Special patrols talk to sources on the street. Undercover Iraqi agents observe target suspects. Unknown Sunni strongholds are thoroughly searched, but there is no sign of Roy.
When Roy was kidnapped, there were folks that were being held and ended up being beheaded. That was kind of certainly my assessment, that Roy was another one of our lost cases.
After 2 long months of captivity, Roy begins to accept his situation, a transition most kidnapped victims go through.
When they first take you, the whole time you think about escape, but in my particular situation, handcuffed and feet tied and then locked in this hole under the ground. And there were always 4 or 5 guards in the same house, and they had weapons. If you were able to get out and overpower these guards, then you have to find transportation with people who are not going to be very friendly to you, and you're going to have to make your way back to Baghdad on roads that you don't know anything about.
New year 2005. With no proof that Roy's alive, the FBI contact his family.
I received another phone call from Carrie, and she was very upset. She said, Mom, they've just called me and asked me where they want Dad's body sent. Do they want it sent to California or Tennessee? And she said, they told me that it was just for the record, but she said, it doesn't sound good.
In turn, Roy worries constantly for his family.
They didn't know whether I was dead or alive, and I had no way to let them know. I always thought that the U.S. military and the Iraqi police and the Iraqi army would be looking for me. But I knew it wouldn't be easy for anybody to find exactly where I was.
Have you anything else to tell?
Even the Filipino diplomats negotiating Robert Tarangoy's release with the kidnappers have no news of Roy.
Every weekly meeting, Roy was always brought up, any update on Roy? And there would be nothing around the room. And, we feared probably his bones were collecting dust somewhere.
After 10 weeks, Roy's health is declining fast. And with no one able or willing to pay the ransom, what is his life worth? Now, with hopes of Roy's survival at an all-time low, the kidnap group finally makes its move.
This man hands me a piece of paper written out in English, and he tells me to memorize it. To help me look emotional and upset, in the video, they said, "We'll beat you."
The video is aired on Al Jazeera.
My name is Roy Hallums. I'm an American national, and I have worked with American forces. I have been arrested by a resistance group in Iraq. I'm please asking for help because my life is in danger because it's been proved that I work for American forces. I'm not asking for any help from President Bush because I know of his selfishness and unconcern. I am asking for the help of Arab rulers, especially President Muammar Gaddafi, because he's known for helping those who are suffering.
We analyzed Roy's video very carefully, looking at his health, looking at his demeanor, knowing all along he was being forced to say what he was saying.
As bad as it may look, the video does prove that Roy is still alive.
And of course, you look at a date stamp on the video to see when was this made, so we can determine was he alive yesterday or 2 weeks ago when the video was made. So anytime you get a video, a proof of life, that's good news.
Help me in this situation so I can be released as quickly as possible from this definite death.
All I was thinking when I was looking at this camera was, I really don't want my family to see this, because I know they're just going to be upset and not know what to do. And there was really nothing they could do.
I watched the whole video over and over. He looked gaunt, and he seemed slightly disoriented. I saw bruising on his face, and I didn't like that. He used his hands in an odd way I had never seen before, and he phrased his words oddly to me. So I knew, I could tell it was scripted.
The kidnappers are trying to manipulate those left outside. They're doing something to communicate a particular message. We've got your guy, we're treating him very badly, so this applies additional pressure to the people outside to make a quick settlement, hopefully at a high price.
The kidnappers believe that President Gaddafi is the best way to a quick, high-price settlement. The Libyan leader allegedly paid part of the ransom for another Filipino hostage taken the year before.
Up until they made the video, it wasn't clear to me what they wanted, because like I say, I didn't know if they were a political group or a group that just wanted to have the murder on tape, or if they were a group that was looking for money. In that situation, the best group you can hope for is somebody who's looking for money, because although they won't treat you well and won't take care of you, they're not going to kill you immediately because they're hoping to get some money out of it.
But if the US won't pay the ransom, how long will the kidnappers wait? Day 88. The kidnappers make a final demand to Roy's employers, again for $12 million. The company's answer, it doesn't have that kind of money. So the kidnappers threaten to sell Roy to al-Zakari, who will most certainly execute him.
In the case of some of our hostages, certainly Zarqawi was seen on video with them, and in some cases even allegedly perpetrating the murder of them.
Without a ransom payment, Roy must confront the worst nightmare possible: a public execution. Three months after Roy Hallums is kidnapped, his captors release a video showing he's still alive. They demand $12 million for him, but the US does not make concessions. The kidnappers threaten to sell him to hardcore extremist al-Zakari, who will execute him. Roy is stuck in a deadly standoff with little hope of survival. Day 90. Another insurgent attack. This time, coalition forces capture them. They are part of a Sunni insurgent group with links to a known kidnap ring. That evening, thermal cameras track the suspects. They're based in a dangerous area south of Baghdad known as the Triangle of Death. Could this be the group that has Roy? An elite commando team arrives within the hour to investigate.
They go in with an overwhelming amount of capability, but surgically and with the precision that is required to overwhelm anybody in a very, very short amount of time.
They arrest the insurgents, but there is no sign of Roy. Kidnappers use fear and violence to break hostages and make them compliant. Roy has to call on exceptional self-control to keep a low profile.
They were so nervous and they had weapons, and I just wanted things to be as calm as possible, so I just sat there.
There's a regular traffic of hostages through the cellar. They're mostly Iraqis, though some Westerners are also dragged in.
Some people were almost hysterical, so you just try to help them get through it as best they can.
Roy never sees his jailers' faces, but as he listens to them for hours each day, he learns a bizarre fact. His captors are hooked on American television.
The shows that were on most of the time were Tom and Jerry, the cartoon, and America's Funniest Home Videos. And they would just be laughing out loud at those two shows.
On the other side of the world, Roy's family struggle to keep hope. But since the hostage video, there's been no news.
I was pretty depressed. It was hard to get out of bed. It was hard to go to work.
I tried to find peace planting flowers, but you have to do more because look what he's going through. Every single day, he may be tormented, beaten, hardly fed. And we're here in our house, comfortable and warm at night. So I made the phone calls, and every single day I tried to call, like, say, a dozen people.
Susan contacts President Bush, Hillary Clinton, Reverend Jesse Jackson, and even Libya's President Gaddafi. To everyone's surprise, Gaddafi appears on Al Jazeera television. He asks Roy's kidnappers to forgive and set him free in the name of Islam and Arabism. But those on the ground in Iraq are skeptical.
These kidnappers, they're not about noble goals. They're really about making money and, again, financing other attacks or other insurgent activities.
Day 100. A suspect vehicle has been located in the Triangle of Death. Military command is informed. Special forces race out to the time-sensitive target. This is one of the military's most urgent codes. The soldiers search every inch of the building. For Roy, locked underground, every sound from above could mean his salvation or his end. The operation doesn't find Roy, but it's far from a failure. It's part of a vital strategy to put the kidnapped groups under constant and intense pressure. The next door could be theirs.
The pressure we exert on kidnapped groups is a team effort, which mobilizes thousands of people around the world. The FBI, the intelligence communities, special forces, local police all work around the clock. We never quit.
But Roy doesn't know that. The perpetual isolation and darkness threatens to crush him. But like many kidnapped victims, he finds a remarkable way to cope.
I would start thinking of trips I wanted to take to see my daughter in California. So I would plan these different trips in my head to help take up the time of the days. And I chose driving in a car because it would take a long time to plan the trip.
One of the worst things about being incarcerated in these kinds of situations is the lack of stimulation. You've got to make up your own. In Roy's case, imagining long trips in minute detail, because what it does is it occupies your mind and keeps your morale up. He was able to literally leave the cell.
4 months after the kidnapping, Al Jazeera receives a video of the Filipino Robert Tarangoy. Like videos of other hostages, The orange jumpsuit is a terrorist signal that the hostage is to be executed. The kidnappers again demand $10 million for Tarangoy from the Philippine government. If their demands are not met, they will execute him. US diplomats are kept abreast of the negotiations between the kidnappers and the Philippine government. Will there be any news of Roy? Day 150. The same vehicle Iraqi agents identified 2 months earlier is once again spotted. Military air surveillance picks up the trail. An army patrol investigates the address it goes to. But Roy is not there. With no ransom paid, have the kidnappers already sold him to al-Zakari? Susan doesn't allow herself to think that.
If you give up hope, it's not going to get you anywhere. You have to be strong, and you have to believe in a miracle to make it happen.
But Susan isn't going to rely solely on miracles. She puts her family house on the market to raise a reward for anyone who can help free Roy.
We sent 500 flyers to Baghdad with a soldier saying there was a reward, for information leading to his release.
But there's no response. Another dead end. 6 months of captivity have psychologically conditioned Roy to an uneasy routine.
Basically, they're going to come at 9 and bring some water and rice, and they're going to take you to the bathroom after that, and then they're going to come back at 2 or 3 with some more rice and water, and then around 6 they're going to come take you to the bathroom. So you have this routine, but then if anything happens to break the routine, then you tense up. Well, what's going to happen now, and are they going to kill me now?
With no ransom from Roy's company or his country, his kidnappers switch their attention to his family. They need a telephone number.
I told them that I didn't know the numbers. The numbers were in my telephone. And when I want to talk to somebody in my family, I just push the button. The guy hits me in the head with a pistol and says, "You're lying, tell us the numbers." And I said, I really don't know. Then he says, "If you don't tell me those phone numbers right now, I'm going to kill you." And I said, "I don't know those numbers." And he says, "Okay." And that was it.
Back in California, Susan Hallums is about to do the unthinkable. She's obtained the kidnapper's phone number from Roy's employer. Mustering all her courage, she calls them.
And I was so scared when I was sitting there calling that number. And one night I tried it all night, and I never got through.
This might be the closest she will ever get to Roy again.
But I thought maybe my number would be coming up so that they would in fact have my number for sure, but they never called me.
Day 200. The hostage working group has a new lead. A surveillance drone picks up suspicious activity south of the city. The team immediately pass it on to the military command. Within an hour, special forces descend on the potentially hot target. It turns out to be a kidnapped group stronghold. But there are no hostages. And once again, no sign of Roy.
We were under the impression the worst case scenario has happened, that Roy has probably been sold up the chain to a hardcore terrorist group.
But that doesn't deter the team from continuing their search and putting more pressure on the kidnapped group.
I know wherever my dad is.
The 23rd of June is Roy's 57th birthday and his 235th day of captivity.
called the Lord's Prayer.
His family hold a vigil for him in California.
Hallowed be your name.
His birthday was one of the hardest moments of my life, was watching her blow out the birthday candles for a dad that wasn't here.
But just at this time of deep despair, events on the other side of the world take a dramatic turn. Robert Tarangoy is released. It's been nearly 8 months since he and Roy were kidnapped. He gives Roy's family the news they've been longing for.
Robert Tarangoy said, "I know that your dad was down there with me." That gave me tons of hope.
As well as the much-needed proof that Roy is still alive, Tarangoy gives the hostage working group vital intelligence that he and Roy were held in a farmhouse cellar.
When Robert got released, he made the statement that he was held with Roy and that Roy was still alive. He heard him cough the night before. That information from Robert Tarangoy was instrumental in getting the case kicked back up again, and even though some of us probably felt that, the worst had probably possibly happened to Roy, but thankfully it hadn't.
But time is running out for Roy, and possibly for his kidnappers. Nearby battles could spark fatal retribution.
The entire time I was being held, I was worried that artillery shells fall on somebody's house and kills their wife and 3 kids, and then the guy comes running in the room where I am with a knife, screaming, and it kills me with that.
And then a new terrible twist to his incarceration. With coalition forces getting closer, the nervous kidnappers begin sealing Roy in his cell for days at a time.
They would bring you a 2-liter bottle of water and some foods for 3 days, and then they would leave. And you could hear them sealing over this door with concrete. That really disturbed me because I thought, well, how could anybody find that door?
Intelligence finally reveals to the hostage working group why, after 8 months, Roy is still alive. In a stroke of extraordinary timing, his kidnappers had not been able to sell him as they threatened to al-Zakari. That's because al-Zakari is under pressure from his own people for murdering British aid worker Margaret Hassan.
There was certainly a backlash, not just within Iraq, but from the al-Qaeda leadership, basically demonstrating that these folks were going beyond the pale in murdering someone of her background who had done nothing but try to assist the Iraqi people.
The backlash went up through, reportedly from Osama bin Laden directly to Zarqawi, hey, knock this off. You're giving us a bad image in the world. And you actually had fatwas that were released by leading Sunni and Shia clerical societies that said, you cannot behead innocents. You cannot behead people who have come to Iraq to rebuild the country.
The executions were stopped. Day 265. Over the months, Roy has watched as 9 other hostages are freed.
You're glad these people are getting released, but I was getting more depressed because I had been there so long, no end in sight, and still every day is uncertainty about what might happen. I mean, you just have this constant tension every day about, well, what's going to happen to me today, and am I going to be here another 10 months?
Well, my fears were that the ransom was paid. They got their money. So what do they need my dad for now? They know they're not getting any money for him, so why keep him? He is a liability. They would get in a lot of trouble if they were found with him.
Roy knows that nobody will pay the ransom to free him. His value to the kidnappers is diminishing fast. After 9 months of captivity, how much longer will they keep him alive? The hostage working group is still searching for Roy Hallums, kidnapped 10 months ago. No one will pay his ransom, so he's a liability to his captors. They will have to dispose of him. Day 311. Another car bomb brings death and misery to the streets of Baghdad. Intelligence leads special forces to a Sunni insurgent hideout south of Baghdad, where they surprise the car bombers. After intense interrogation, one of the bombers admits the explosives were bought with ransom money. Under pressure, he gives up a name. And then an address. Iraqi forces are quick to arrest Ahmed. Every minute is critical. If Roy's kidnappers find out Ahmed has been taken, they might kill him straight away. But under interrogation, Ahmed denies everything. Until he's brought face to face with his accuser. The game is up. Ahmed tells them where Roy is being held. This could be the key. Aerial surveillance pinpoints the location. A farmhouse 18 miles south of Baghdad in the Triangle of Death. This is it. The time-sensitive target that the hostage working group and the special forces have been waiting for. Location details are hot briefed on-board laptops. By the time they arrive, they have a precise assault plan. The hostage rescue team reach the target in less than an hour.
And I hear all this running and shouting, and then I hear a sledgehammer hitting this door that's in the ceiling. That's really unusual. So now I'm thinking, well, I hope this is a rescue. I hope this is not some other group trying to steal me from this group. I wasn't sure what was going on. Then the door just falls on the floor where I am. And then there's just all this dust and dirt streaming in with the sunlight, and a soldier jumps in down the hole. He has his vest on and his pistols and machine gun, and he says, "Are you Roy?" And I said, "Yes." He says, "Come on, we're getting out of here." I said, "Sounds good to me."
Roy Hallums has been a hostage for 311 days. Just over 10 months. By the time of his rescue, he's lost 40 pounds and can barely walk.
It's a testament to who Roy is as a human being, and it's those stories of people overcoming insurmountable odds to survive, and Roy is certainly one of those stories. You know, I don't know how he did it, frankly. I do not know how he did it. But imagine this being your home for 10 months, 8 months, 7 months.
The best sound I had ever heard was his voice. I was ecstatic. I was in shock, actually. First of all, I wanted to tell him I loved him. I never got to say I love you before he was taken.
I think this will always be a part of our lives.
When I was laying there tied up in that dark room, I wasn't thinking about a new car or new furniture. I was thinking about being home with my daughters and granddaughters, because that's the things that count.
Getting Roy back was like winning the lottery, and was one of the, the definitely highlights of my tour.
Roy's rescue is a great demonstration of our will to leave no one behind.
The hostage working group continues its tireless quest to free kidnapped hostages in Iraq and around the world and bring them home alive.